Today I want to talk about Pinkie Pacts, or otherwise known as consumer-driven contract testing. So after we already have one day done on the PyCon, and we probably had a long night yesterday talking about AI, ChatGPT, Python with our fellow colleagues, we want to start here with a little testing topic, and we want to keep it a little bit high level. So what I'm hoping that you go out with from this talk is to understand what's the process behind it, what it is about, what it's for, if you can give it a try. Now, the experts in the audience will already see, yeah, Kristian, that's your code example, which we'll introduce later on. Sneaky, sneaky. That is true. For everyone else, it's a surprise, which will come in handy later. So I am Kristian, as you already heard. If you want to guess where I'm coming from, that's pretty apparent from my, from my way to talk. So no brownie points for that. If you want to write me an email about the talk, about contract testing, in special or in just whatever you want to know, give me a shout on pinkiepacts@pm.me. I'm a software engineer in a company called Renaissance Re, which is a reinsurance company, and I promise you it's not as boring as it sounds. It's actually on the technical side quite interesting, which means that my days are laden with Python, with AWS, and with application development. So especially in this part, I have to give you a warning. And the warning is, I didn't do a presentation for a very long time, so I'm super, super nervous. But I hope all of you help me out, and please bear with me in this dangerous game. Now, that's the next part I want to say. First of all, that's my terrible attempt at an even more terrible pun. But this is also how I feel about integration tests. So if that gets you in some kinds of feelings about adrenaline-pumped fights against your enemies, then you're in the right room. Because every time I see an integration test, I see, okay, that might explode at any time. And if it explodes, the whole code is in shambles. We have to find out, was it on the left side of the code? Was it on the right side of the code? Who's responsible? Who gets this bug point? And I mean, it is a little bit fun. I like to work with other people and to find out where is the bug, how can we fix it. But it's also a little bit competitive in who got the most bug points and who's to blame. No blame game. Also, it's on top of a volcano, if you see that. So that's symbolizing the end users that come to you and say, fix it, fix it, fix it, fix it. Why is it on prod? Actually, that analogy went way better than I expected. So, to the introduction of the slide, that is in a little bit better words than a bear would probably get out of it. And it basically says exactly what we are here for right now. So the integration tests are basically one for all. We go in, everybody is involved, we see if it works. If it breaks, we all come together and find out what happens. That's not really what I like to do, because usually I spend 15 minutes debugging, and then I say, yeah, you're wrong. Timeout on the other side, on the external service. And yes, sometimes I'm the external service, but that's for another talk. So what we did in our team is have a look at other things where we could replace integration tests with something else that has a lot of advantages. And in this case, contract testing came into play, which is more like civilized. Yeah, like you stay on your place, you don't take somebody else's spot. Your responsibility is your application, and you don't break anybody else's. So let's have a look how that works in reality. So back to our code example. That didn't take long, did it? So we're back here again. What does this presentation client that gives me the path to my slides actually do? I promise it is nothing big. It is really just what all of you probably see in your daily life as well. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. We have a start presentation method. It basically just gets business data, in this case a topic name and an author name. It transforms this business data into something that we can send to an external service. So in this case, HTTP request, sends it over, gets a response, and then transforms the response again into business data, into something we can use. This transforming part is kind of what the client does. Okay. Now, it would be very, very embarrassing if it failed while I'm on here, so I guess we should test it. That's something users usually want. An integration test for this example is pretty easy. I would do it like this. Basically, run the presentation client against a server that is currently locally running, but could be deployed on wherever you want it to, and assert that the right thing comes out. If we do that, we test a whole bunch of stuff. In essence, that's what I currently explained. So the first thing is, from our application logic data, our input data, we create the right request. The provider takes the request, makes the right response out of it. Out of the response, we again get data that I can actually use. So that's a good idea, isn't it? No, because there's way too much provider in there for me. If that breaks, I have a problem. Other way as well. So that's exactly what we want to get rid of, this integration test. Too many disadvantages. One of my favorite disadvantages here is the late feedback that we get. So if my provider somehow breaks a contract that I have with them, an external service, like a database now returns a different schema of data, then I just find that out in the integration test, which means that I already deployed a whole bunch of different infrastructure. That doesn't make sense for me. I mean, I know the contract, the provider knows the contract, they should know that they break it right away, as early as possible. Integration tests are super expensive in time and cost, mostly because you have to deploy them. So people come to you and say, hey, I have to test this feature, can you spin up a new environment for me? My blanket answer is no, unless you make a really, really good case for it. Just try it out with the request on your side, and I do it on my side. Then the integration test is just a checkmark exercise. Unreliable test data is a thing as well, especially in our world. We have to create a lot of test data, but we are not too good at it. So if you create test data in a system where many, many applications access it, that's way harder than doing it just in your own unit test. A bunch of others I don't want to get too much into, but you should if you consider contract testing for you, is a whole lot of team effort, because integration tests are a little bit hard. They don't have ownership, a clear ownership. If something breaks, you don't know where it was. You have to spend 15 minutes of your day. You could spend drinking coffee with finding out that somebody else has to prove it, and so on. So that is a little bit unfortunate. So what we did in my team is try out a new thing. Every time we think about creating a new integration test, we ask one question. And this question is sometimes different than other times, but it's fine, because we basically ask, which error do you want to find with this? Or in another way, which ticket do you want to prevent? And why we did that, it's actually pretty surprising that there's less and less integration tests that we actually have to write. So we went through the company and asked a few people, why do you do that? And there were some gems in there, like, I want to know that the application was deployed correctly. Fair point at the first start, but on the other hand, why do I need an integration test? Why would I need an external service to just check that my application is deployed? Doesn't make any sense. Just use a health endpoint or trust your deployment tools. So, no reason. Verifying external requirements like permissions or SSL certificates, that's a trauma still, sorry. Doesn't make an integration test value, doesn't generate value, because again, you don't need an external service. We went down the rabbit hole with that one, and in the end, we found out that there's not too much things we actually want to test in an integration test. But we found a few things. And these things are exactly these three. You see, I really hammer that down so you go out of this with those 3 points. My integration test should check that my consumer creates the right request, that my provider creates the right response out of this request, and that my consumer, again, creates the right data out of this response. Those are the three things I want to test. All the other stuff, use canaries, use, I don't know, other stuff. Cool. And this is where our tool comes in. So in this presentation, I'm going to show you a little bit of Pact. That's a quote from the Pact website. If you want to have a look at the website, it's really good. It has a lot of documentation also about contract testing, why it's useful, when you should use it and when you shouldn't use it. It's surprisingly well maintained. So have a look at it. Pact is now 10 years old this year. And they did a lot of rework this year under the guise of the Pacttober. So if you want to get in, if you want to do a few PRs, please do. The base idea of Pact is that we should split this dependency in our integration tests between consumers and providers. So in our case, my presentation client that calls the presentation server, that shouldn't be tested at the same time. We should split it in the middle, and we should make 2 unit tests out of it. One on the consumer side, one on the provider side. Easy enough. If you have something like that in your world, like where you contact an external service, doesn't even matter which one, doesn't have to be an API, it can be a message bus, it can be AWS or database, whatever, doesn't matter. You probably in your unit tests have something like this. We follow our typical arrange, act, assert structure. So at the start, we mock everything away that we don't need for our unit, for the unit we want to test. So in this case, we mock away the whole post request to something else. However you do that, that's on you. I used just a typical mocker here. Afterwards, you actually run your unit. It gets the data back. And at the end, you assert exactly what I hammered down already a few times. Like, in this case here, line 13-ish, you test that the right request was created from the business data we passed in line 9. Great stuff. So, that's a unit test all of you should have. Probably. If not, that's a chance. In Pact, that is a little bit different. So in Pact, we use something called give and when thens. You might know that from your tickets. Some people like to do that in Jira. And this is basically just a description of your interaction between the consumer and the provider. So the consumer says, hey, I have a request to start a new presentation. When that comes, I expect a post request to this URL. Somewhere behind is a body that's not on the slide, or I would have to scroll. And I expect this response to come back. How different does it look to the unit test you already had? A little bit. I hope the answer is a little bit. Because that's exactly what we had in our unit tests already. We have the expected response body, we have the expected request body, we have the URL. That's already there. So there's not much happening here that changes the way we think about tests or how we write unit tests for our consumer. The act part is the same as well, and the assert part as well. Great. Does that make sense? Just a little Nice, thank you. So how does it look in code? I am a fan of code. So that's how it could actually look in code. So we have the expected request body, we have the expected response body, we have our pact, and then it runs. Let me try to run this. You remember the bear. Let's hope it works. I run the client, boop, 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 and it works. Okay, I mean, what happens is probably the first question. Why do I show you this? Because the important part here is that Pact in the backend actually spins up a server, a mock server. Pact mocks away the provider, and while you send your requests to this mocked provider, it keeps track. So when we actually did our Pact given when then, the mock server wrote down, registered this interaction, and while you run your unit test, it compares if the request actually came, and then puts the response back. That's great. It's one less thing I have to do. If a Ruby server is the best way to do it, that's another question. PRs welcome. The new implementation is in Rust, so feel free. But that is already a good thing. So what we have is our unit test. We have our mock server. That's how you put it in as a PyTest fixture. It's really nothing big. It just says, hey, bring up this server, register everything that comes to it, store whatever you have in your logs, in a directory. If you don't want to get deeper into it, I go over because of the time. Okay, so that's hopefully how some of you feel. Thank you, Kristian. All you did was take this data, this request body from here, and you put it here, and to make it even worse, you introduced a new tool into our pipeline. That's not enough for me, you know? That's not good. What I say, you're right. That's absolutely true. Because where we are in our three-step ladder here is we only have the first two parts where we say consumer has the right request, takes the right response. Doesn't help me anything when the provider changes its behavior or when I have a wrong assumption about how the provider actually works. So, tough luck. So what's the big deal? And the big deal is that. The big deal is you already have all the data you need for your provider tests in your consumer unit tests. Remember, we specified the requests and we specified the responses. What else does a provider need? We just have to write a request and have to verify the response. You know, I'm really getting down on that. I feel it myself. So all we actually have to do here is keep track of it. Let's write down those requests and responses as interactions. And obviously I wouldn't show it if that wouldn't actually happen. Because when you run this mock server in your unit tests, this file gets written down. This is a contract file between two services, a consumer and a provider. And it contains exactly those requests and responses. That's actually pretty nice, because it already tells me what exists and what not. So basically, that's the change we have here. In our provider mock, on the unit test side for the consumer, lower part, we write down our contract of interactions. And this contract of interactions should hold true when we run it against the provider. This picture here. That's the thing. If you understand that, you got enough out of this presentation. Oh, well, sorry, that's maybe, I don't know, downplaying is not the right word. But if you understand that one, you understand where the value in contract testing is. Keep it in mind. Okay, that's just how the contract looks. That is easy. The more test cases you have in your unit tests, the more interactions you specify in this contract. So that's getting quite sizable. But now, we want to talk about the provider testing, because that's the only missing step we have. And as we already said, we want to take the requests out of the contract, want to replace them against an existing provider, and then match the responses. That sounds easy enough, so I think I can probably need, that's only 20 minutes, by the way. I just wanted to make sure. So that's probably easy enough to write this tool. But as always, obviously there's already a tool. And that's how it's called. That's the pact verifier. And it does exactly what we wanted to do. It takes a contract, in this case, a contract JSON file, can be a URL, can be from a web service called a pact broker. There's a lot there. And runs it against a deployed service. Exactly those requests we, as a consumer, specified. Don't trust me? No problem. Let's have a look. Oh, well, let's have a look might be a bit, but it works. I hope that's okay. That runs against my own server, that runs here, and just replace those request response pairs. And that is pretty cool. Why is that pretty cool? Because as you see, I don't even need any kind of client. This decouples the consumer tests and the provider tests. That was actually something that we really thought is a really good thing. Because in order to make sure my provider adheres to this contract, I don't even need a deployed consumer. I can just run it on my CLI, on my CI/CD, wherever, in a pull request probably. On the other hand, for my consumer, I don't actually need a provider. I can run it 5 times and then give it to the provider. So that decouples where you run your very, very expensive and slow integration tests. It's really good. That is for something I skipped. But in this case, I just want to make a little point for you as well. You can use this pact verifier from the CLI. That's perfectly fine. And in this case, you could say I'm done, because I have my consumer tests, it creates a contract, I run the pact verifier, nice, that's it. But try to use it as it is intended, which means, obviously, I want to run this verification in my unit tests as well. That is supported. You can just, in your PyTest session or your Python testing tool of your choice, takes a verifier, and then you get all of the goodness of your IDE. Let me show you that at least. So, for example, I put on the debugger on my service, I come here, and I see right away, okay, there's an error. That's the error I hid from you due to timing reasons. Okay, I hope you see the potential in that, because that means I can just throw the contract around and people can run it on their machines before they even merge it, before they have to deploy anything. Boop, 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 boop. So running it in your unit tests has a bunch of really cool advantages, which I already said. Full usage of mocking utilities is a pretty cool one. Like we work a lot with AWS. So in this case, if we run an integration test, we incur a bunch of money, bunch of cost, and it takes a lot of time. If we run it in our unit tests, yeah, Moto mocks all of that away. Nice, click, 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 test-driven development. Okay, and at this stage, we basically got all of that done. So that is great. We now have the consumer test to verify that requests and responses on the consumer side are great. And then we use exactly those requests and responses to run them against the provider, which makes sure that the provider and consumer are always up to date, always entangled. There's no way the provider could assume they get a different request than the consumer actually sends. That is where the split, where the other image comes into play. So, what did we learn? Well, I don't know. I don't know what you learned, but I hope I can remedy that with a slide here. So, what we learned is that we can definitely safeguard a contract between 2 different services, a consumer and a provider, without having an integration test. We can do it with 2 unit tests and a specified contract in the middle. We know that those can run independently. That is really cool, because I don't have to debug anymore which part of this whole integration landscape actually failed. I know it right away. No, mine works, yours not. Yeah, all cool. We have automatically documented interactions. That is pretty nice as well. I mean, just think about that. You have your API. You want to remove an endpoint. What do you think first? I don't know. At least I do. Because, yeah, whoever uses this endpoint, I don't know. There's notebooks out there, there's scripts out there, I don't know. So I probably have to version it. Not the case anymore. You have your contract, you know exactly who to ask, can I change this endpoint? There's a lot of cool diagramming there as well, just for the record. Yep, reducing the amount of integration environments, great stuff. Cost, time, I'm happy. unit tests where possible. I think in the interest of time, perfect. That is just a list of what the next steps for you are anyway. There's a lot to learn. If you want to ask something, please do. But no problem about it. This is really just one slide to just say, hey, that exists. And with this, let's make a contract between us. You ask me questions, and I give you answers, just in case I have them.
Thank you so much, Kristian. Really sorry we don't have time for questions.
Oh.
Well, maybe a very, very quick one, if you have a small question. That's the pact.
It's no problem at all. It specifies a post, so they have to write a mail to me. Otherwise, the tests fail.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you.